Identity theft. It's a nightmare, and it can happen to anyone. Imagine this, your wallet goes missing at a bar one night, you cancel everything, but the alerts keep coming. New bank accounts and credit cards in your name. Email and social media accounts taken over, passwords changed, big charges, damages to your credit score. It could take months or years to untangle all of this. You may never get paid back in full, and nobody seems to be able to help you. Not the police, not your bank, not the government. But I'm here today with someone who can help you. Carrie Kerskie is a private investigator and expert in identity theft investigations. She's spent years helping people recover from identity theft, and she's made it her mission to help consumers protect themselves and to educate other investigators about how to do the work with victims of identity crimes. Lucky for us, Carrie is also an instructor with PI Education. Today we're talking about how identity theft works, how these cases play out, and why educating the public and fellow PIs can be a game changer in your clients' lives and in your own business. Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I'm absolutely tickled to see your face again. It's been a long time since we've had a chat. For our listeners that don't know the name Carrie Kerskie, tell us a little bit about your background and how did you get into this line of work?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. It's great to see you as well. Background, my private investigation agency's been in Naples, Florida since 2001. It was around 2006 where we had our call from a first identity theft victim. And at the time, there weren't really many resources. I mean, the FTC was just starting with their website. So she's like, I'm desperate. I need help. I said, well, we've never done that. She said, I don't care. Help me figure it out. So that's kind of what started it. Then over the years, word of mouth spread. Was asked to do public speaking to warn others about identity theft, and it kind of took on a life of its own. And so, for about the past 10 years, all we do is work with identity theft victims and work with executives and high net worth individuals and families for the prevention and restoration as well. So it's definitely kept us busy, but that's kind of how we got started. Just first phone call.
I love it. And I think it's safe to say you're one of the leading experts in this field. I think everybody that knows you kind of acknowledges that. What are you seeing right now in terms of trends? What's changing in the world of identity theft?
Well, as you can imagine, AI is having its impact on the world, everything, and also with scammers. It's making it much easier for them. They can mass produce, they can implement changes much faster. Just like businesses are using AI to adapt and grow, so are the criminal organizations. I gave a presentation once at a PI conference where I was talking about, how to use ChatGTP, and that's just one example. And I said, write me a phishing email. And within seconds, it had a beautifully written out email about this is your bank. We had a suspicious transaction. But of course, at the very bottom, it says this is for demonstration purposes only. Well, the criminals just take that out. So,
Yeah, just delete that
so
sentence.
exactly. So that's one of the big trends is that no longer do they have to, be creative and you don't have the typos, you don't have the grammatical errors. The other thing we're seeing is with the deep fakes, when they call, even though they might have an accent, when you hear the voice on the phone, there is no accent. So that's another way that they are using those filters to convince people. Caller ID spoofing, they've been doing that for years. They're still doing it. They're just upping their game. So as technology advances, so too do their techniques. And that's what makes it hard for everyone today is because it changes so fast that as soon as you learn something, it's like, oh, well, that's obsolete. Now I have to pay attention to this. So it's constantly changing. So a lot of the same old tried and true scams are still out there, still convincing people. It's just they're being done in a different way. And because of all the data breaches, you can buy, and when I say you, I don't mean just private investigators. I
One.
mean anyone can go online and buy a name, address, date of birth, and social for about 10
Yeah,
cents.
yeah,
And that's not on the dark web.
yeah. And I've been getting texts about my unpaid toll fines for the
Yes.
past couple of months, and it's everybody's pretty well aware that's due to a data breach somewhere.
Exactly. Well, that one is, it makes the rounds. It seems like you'll be inundated for about a week or two with it, then it dies off, and then a couple months later you get it again. But the criminals are relying on is
Yeah,
circumstance or can coincidence.
yeah.
And oftentimes people will call me. They're like, "Well, I think it's a scam, but I was traveling on the highway, and I don't know. Maybe if they had one of these things on there, maybe I did do something." So that's what they're hoping on.
Yeah.
If you're at home and you're not driving anywhere, it's obvious.
The first time I got one of those texts, I had just gotten back. Like, I'd been to Texas 2 months earlier and had a rental car, drove on some toll roads, and I mean, I know that my contract with Hertz, they will send me an additional invoice and pay the thing. But I got the text. I'm like, huh. And even like, I'm in the business, right? I'm a private investigator. I know better. I,
Right?
I even I looked at the text like, oh, wait a minute, and then it hit me. Um, no toll company is going to send you a text message asking you to click a link to pay your bill.
Exactly. They're government agencies. They work by snail
Yeah,
mail. So that's one of the telltale
yeah,
signs. But when it comes to identity theft, anyone can be a target. It doesn't have to be from anything that you have done yourself.
yeah,
It's just your name is next on the list.
yep,
So, I mean, and that's why with the people that we work with, we don't tell them that we can protect them from identity theft because you can't, it's
yeah,
impossible. So what we say to clients is we make their identity difficult to use so the criminals move on to an easier target. And that's about the best we can do.
yeah, yeah. What surprises people most when you walk them through how identity theft works?
The fact that their identity is available for sale right now online for about 10 cents. That is the big one. And they have been led to believe from all the media and everything that you read, the articles, publications, and everything else. And these are all well-meaning journalists. It's just they don't understand the industry. But they have all been led to believe if I sign up for credit monitoring or an identity theft protection service, I don't have to worry about anything. Because when they call us, they have those services. And they're like, I've been paying for this for years. How did this happen? I'm like, there's no prevention with those at all. All they are is now there's a problem and they may or may not fix it. So those are some of the biggest things that once we really tell people about all the different types of identity theft and how, credit monitoring is only maybe 20% of what's out there. And there are more than 50 consumer reporting agencies, not just Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian.
Yeah,
So, by the time we're all done with the phone call, I think their heads are kind of blown and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea.
yeah, it's crazy. You've been helping people recover from identity theft for years now. Is there one case or moment that kind of stuck with you?
Oh, there are so many of them. Two really were the big ones. One to show kind of the role that we play and how we help clients, and the other one to show the complexity. So the first one is we were contacted by a woman where she was renewing her American Express, or she should have gotten a new one in the mail. Well, instead of getting the card, she got a letter saying, "We're not renewing your card because you're deceased." She's like, well, last I checked, I have a pulse. so, so she tried calling them. Yeah, exactly. Called them, wasn't getting anywhere. She tried months with this. Finally, her a wealth management advisor said, call Carrie and her team. And so she gave us a call. We talked to them. I kind of knew what happened because we'd seen it before. But in her case, what happened is her husband had passed away 3 years prior. So when the mortgage company reported the death, they did it under her social, not his. But what she didn't realize is all three bureaus, credit bureaus, had her labeled as deceased. She was weeks away from having all of her assets, her bank
Oh,
accounts, everything frozen because they thought it was, well, we used to call it ghosting, but that has a new meaning today.
yeah.
But everything changes. But she was minutes away from not being able to access anything.
Oh my gosh.
So when we first contacted the credit bureaus, they did like they do with the victims. These companies know victims don't know what their rights are, so they tried to play the games with us. And I'm like, wait a minute here. Here's what the federal law says. I'd be happy to email you a copy of the citation in case you forgot what it says. And they're like, please hold, and came back on like a minute or two later and like, problem resolved. She's alive. We figured it out what it was. And, so that just shows it. It really was like a 5-minute phone call.
Yeah. Yeah.
is all it took because we knew what the laws are. Another one that shows the complexity of it, we were contacted by a victim where he got two things in the mail. One was for a car loan and one was for insurance on a new car. Problem was, he was out of the country. He did not buy a new car. And this was, of course, after 2020 because everything now is you can do remotely.
Yeah.
So whomever this person was, they bought a car from a dealership in another state and had it delivered all without setting foot in the dealership. It was all done via online communications.
Wow.
And so we went ahead and we mitigated the car loan and the insurance, got those taken care of. And then all of a sudden, after that was done, my clients started getting letters in the mail from toll violations, red light violations, all these traffic citations. So whoever had this car and was driving it was a really bad driver or just didn't care. So then, and this was in multiple states, so we had to contact each one of those. And many of these agencies had never dealt with this type of identity theft before. So they were trying to figure out procedures as we were going through this process. So then after a year of all of this, we finally got everything resolved because a lot of it was, court cases and whatnot. A year later, my client gets a collection letter and it was for a second auto insurance policy. So what the person had done is after we canceled the first insurance policy, obviously they tried to register the car. They couldn't because there was no insurance. They signed up for another company. Well, the bill was never paid. And after 12 months worth, they tried to come after my client. So a year later, so that just shows how identity theft, it's more than just financial. I mean, if he would not have been aware of this, his license could have been suspended or revoked.
Sure. Sure.
So that, those are just two brief examples of ones that really stood out.
I love it. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. It's like literally is an onion. When we work with a victim, they come to us with one problem. By the time we've done the initial intake session, we usually find three or four more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now you're teaching a live course over at PI Education this August. What
Yes.
what are folks going to walk away with if they attend this class?
So a couple of big things is one is private investigators think that working with identity theft victims is finding the bad guy, finding the person who did it. That is irrelevant when it comes to restoration. There are laws out there protecting victims, and you don't have to have the identity of the perpetrator.
Right.
So it's not like your typical, and a lot of PIs come from law enforcement background, and you have to, get the evidence and prove who did it, go through the whole court proceedings, all the good stuff. Identity theft, that it doesn't happen that way. All the victims that we work with, we don't ever have to identify who did it. We just have to document that the victim is a victim of identity theft. And usually it's police report or an Federal Trade Commission affidavit, one of those type of things. And then we work with the companies to mitigate it. But there are laws in place that protect victims. So really, when you're working with identity theft victims, you're not finding the bad guy. You're being an advocate for the victim.
Yeah.
And we as investigators have this skill set already in place. We know how to, talk on the phone. We know how to document phone calls. We know, how to ask the right questions to get to the right answer or to get to the right person. These are things we do on a daily basis that you can just apply to helping victims recover. And the biggest thing is there's no shortage of victims.
Yeah.
When the economy gets worse, victims increase. 2020, I mean, it was just the first quarter of 2021, we were turning away victims because we were at capacity. We couldn't help anymore because of the PPP, EIDL, all those other ones. So really, we're going to show you the right way to work with identity theft victims, why you should work with them, because basically by the time they contact us, they're like, take my money, please. Just make this go away.
Help me.
And it's recession proof.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this. What are some real world ways private investigators or other professionals can help victims of identity theft?
So a couple different things. There are really two big ways they can help. One is obviously the restoration, helping them recover, restore their identity so that they can move on with their lives. The other one is prevention, working with people to help them put in place the measures to make their identity difficult to use. For example, a credit freeze, the simplest and easy thing that can be done.
Yeah.
It's free, it's mandated by federal law, but the credit bureaus are making it difficult to do.
Yeah.
They hide it, they bury it on their site. Anyone can set up a free online account, but depending on where you go on their website, you could have the paid monitoring, the free one. You could do a credit lock as opposed to a credit freeze. So a lot of times when people come to us, they're like, oh yeah, I had an incident 5 years ago. I locked everything down. I'm good. They had a fraud alert that
Yeah.
expired after 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really helping people with prevention. For a while, what we were, because people would, contact us, I would tell everybody, here's what you need to do. Go freeze your credit. And then they call me going, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
So we would just charge a flat rate, go to people's homes, get everything put in place for them, leave behind all the documentation with them. We kept nothing with us. And that way they could maintain going forward.
Yeah.
So that in itself is another line of service that you could offer.
Yeah, the credit freeze is a really good option. And for our listeners, if you're not a private investigator, a credit freeze is never a bad idea. If
Right.
you find yourself in a situation where you're like, I need to buy a home, or whatever, you can unfreeze it for a period of time and go through that process. But having a freeze, that's a preventative measure that stops a lot of the problems right up front.
Right. So, what a credit freeze does, and again, it's mandated by federal law, says that the bureaus are not allowed to release your credit report for any new credit applications or an increase in a credit limit.
Yeah.
So, it has no impact on any of your current credit accounts at all. It's just for anything new. Now, what we tell people is that it doesn't prevent the bad guys from filling out credit applications, but it prevents the applications from being approved and the accounts getting opened.
Yeah.
So by putting that, like, remember the victim I just talked about with the car loan? If he would have had a credit freeze in place, none of that would have ever happened.
Carrie, Kim was out of town several years ago. Her car had died. I went to the Ford dealership. I was going to pay cash for the car, but I got to thinking about it. I was like, we could do a little bit of a loan here. And so I worked with the dealership to do a loan, and it was through Ford Motor Credit. And the guy came back and he goes, I don't know what's going on. Like you're not in the system. I'm like, oh, I've got a freeze on
Yeah.
everything.
Like, oh yeah, that thing.
I guess I'll just pay cash for this thing after all. Let me ask you this. Is this a good specialty for investigators to get into it?
Absolutely. Because, like I said earlier, there's an endless supply of
Yeah.
clients. Identity theft happens every day, can happen to anyone at any point in time. So, I don't care who you are or how well you think you're protected. When your name is next on their list, they're going to use it.
That's it. That's it. Carrie, you've recently taken on a leadership role over at the Florida Association of Private Investigators. Congratulations, number one. Tell us about
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, so I'm excited. So I've been a longtime member of FAPI, again, Florida Association of Private Investigators. I've been a member since I think 2007, and had many different roles, on the board and helping with conferences and such over the years. So I'm very excited and was very honored to be elected as the new president. But yeah, it's a great association. Anyone who's a Florida investigator definitely got to do it. But we also have members that are not in Florida. And that's because when you join an association, the best things you get out of it is networking opportunities because you're going to find people where maybe you need a case and it goes to another state or another city or another specialty. You also will get education because these things are always changing. You need to keep up to date with what's going on out there. And then finally, your state legislative issues, because easily they could change something that would make your life very difficult. So those are really the three biggest reasons for joining state associations. So if you're not in one in your state, look it up and join it.
Yeah, no doubt. And what do you say to private investigators who say, oh, I don't need to be a member of an association?
You're missing out. You are missing out. And for a while, I didn't join them. I'd go to the conferences and thought that was enough. But once you join, it elevates your professionalism. And when you go to conferences and you're going to the networking events for the state associations, you get to meet fellow investigators face to face. And once you do that, that helps you put a face to that name. You can develop a rapport and a trust with them because you're trusting them to help with your cases and your clients. So really getting to know people, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, we've had some clients where, again, it's an identity theft client we're working with, but they had another issue and they were, traveling overseas and they had an issue. We reached out to one of the associations we're a member of, found a member who resided there, and they took care of the problem, and we looked like heroes.
Yeah.
And it was just because we were part of an association.
Yeah, and my rule of thumb is always, I don't have to be the guy. I just have to be the guy that knows a guy or a girl somewhere that can help the person. I can't do everything. I'm not an expert in
Right.
many things. I'm considered an expert in literally two specific things, but that being able to have that Rolodex, that list of contacts, you can say, "Oh, I can't help you, but Carrie can." That's
Right.
where the association thing comes in really handy.
Absolutely.
Carrie, let me ask you this. Somebody's out there listening to the show. They're on the fence about whether or not they want to sign up for this course in August. What do you say to them right now?
How confident are they that their business is going to be around if the economy goes south? We were all part of 2008, 2009 when all that happened. And, we saw it as well. And that was kind of when we really started doing the shift to working exclusively with identity theft victims, because we did all types of investigations. The insurance companies that we did work for, they were stopping doing investigations. Law firms that we did cases for, they were cutting back, they were cutting their staff. So everyone was being affected. The thing that kept us afloat through that whole time, identity theft cases.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And you're not having to learn a whole new thing. It's not like learning OSINT, where that's a whole, it's fabulous to know, but there is a steep learning curve,
yeah,
once you really try to specialize in that. This is using skills that you already have.
yeah,
And depending on how you structure it with us over the years of doing it, we have it structured now where our clients pay us an annual fee to do all this for them. Basically, they have us on retainer. So we have recurring revenue as a private investigating agency.
yeah,
How often does that happen?
yeah, yeah. That's it. Look, we work in a business that is, sometimes we're crazy busy. Sometimes we have no work coming in the door at all. I know during COVID, all of my court cases came to a screeching halt. I had 6 months where, I had a couple of attorney friends who were like, "Hey, come out and do some work on this case," but it was like make work. And I didn't feel good about that. Um, this kind of work that is evergreen, that is always going to be there for you to be able to do the work, help your clients in a meaningful way. There's nothing at all wrong with that. Carrie, let me ask you this. If people are watching this, considering coming to the class in August, where can they find more of your work and where can they connect with you?
Sure, the easiest way is go to my website, which is carriekerskie.com.
Very good.
They can also find, we have a YouTube channel, and I'm available on social media at Carrie Kerskie.
I love it. Carrie, thank you again so much for taking the time to be here today. Always good to talk to you. Anything else, any final words you want to share with our guests?
No, just an honor, and I'm glad to see your face again. It's been quite a while.
Been a long
So
time.
glad to keep in touch. And again, if you're an investigator and you haven't considered identity theft investigations, I would highly suggest you at least consider it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for our listeners, that is the Sound of Pursuit this week. Thank you for tuning in.
You've been listening to The Sound of Pursuit, a podcast by Pursuit Magazine and PI Education.